This is my homemade sailboat that I've been working on for the past 3 years. And yes, she looks a little different compared to my last video. Although before I could transform the boat into what she looks like right now, I had to do a lot of prep work.
Alright, I am pretty pissed off right now.
Uh-oh.
Oh, hate doing that shit. My main goal for today is to prep the boat for the keel and the paint while also staying organized. So I made a pretty long to-do list, and my goal today is to check off every single box on that list. Step 1 is to finish the cockpit drainage holes.
The cockpit drainage holes. You'd figure that whenever it rains, this hole will help drain water. Nope. I swear to God, whenever it rains, the boat floods. Granted, I filmed this clip well before I drilled that hole. So to prevent the cockpit from turning into a bathtub, I got this 3¼ inch PVC pipe, which will be shoved up into this hole in the transom. Although the pipe was a little too big to fit into the hole.
That's what she said.
So I used my palm sander to help remove some of its material.
All right, let's see if this will fit. Ooh. Still too big. More sanding.
I wasn't trying to remove a lot of material because I ended up using my mallet to force the PVC pipe down into the transom hole.
Hey.
Stoked with the pipe actually fitting, I used my box cutter and some sandpaper to help clean up the exterior of the hole. I then made a very small batch of epoxy, tried to get as much of it into the transom hole, and then reinstalled the drainage pipe.
There we go.
For the extra PVC pipe that was sticking out, I grabbed this flush cut saw to help me get a perfectly smooth and flat cut.
There are some gaps, but I will fill those with some thickened epoxy. All right, I found an isolating saw,
So I tried using the flush cut saw at first, but it was just a complete show. Thank God I found this oscillating saw.
Pretty loose. I'm just gonna... Hey, oh, look at that. That looks pretty damn good. All right, so I got that hole finished, and I also got the other one finished as well, and I sanded off the paint around them. So now I'm gonna go back with some thickened epoxy and fill any gaps. Let's start with...
My thickened epoxy solution is really just epoxy and some fine sawdust.
Now, I'm gonna add it to this little bag where I cut the corner off so it's like a pipette, kind of like when you're icing a cake.
I personally think this is the way to go when applying thickened epoxy.
All right, now we just gotta let that sit and dry. A lot more.
This is way easier than trying to use a putty knife or a popsicle stick.
More is always better. In this case. All right, so this step is completely finished. I'm just waiting for the thickened epoxy to dry, then I'll give it a nice little sand. But I am gonna jump around the steps a little bit. Instead of sanding and patching the transom, I'm gonna be moving on to sanding the exterior of the boat and removing any high spots in the fiberglass.
It's pretty self-explanatory. I just grabbed my palm sander with some 80 grit and went to town on the port side. The higher grit sandpaper made this step fairly easy and quick to complete. Once I got done with the port side, I went back and dealt with the thickened epoxy around the drainage holes. I actually really enjoyed sanding them down because once I was finished, the results were extremely smooth. Moving to the deck, I started to sand off about 2 inches of paint from the edge of the boat. This is just some fiberglass prep work because I'll be adding a long strip along this edge to help reinforce it. This is because I want the pathways up to the bow to be more rigid.
All right, so the entire hull of the sailboat has been roughly sanded, and I also quickly just did the transom and the starboard side as well. So now I'm gonna walk around with an X-Acto blade and cut out all of the bad fiberglass in prep for the thickened epoxy and new fiberglass.
Please don't judge me for my crappy fiberglassing job. I know it's terrible. That's why I'm going back and removing all the bubbles and imperfection. To keep things moving though, I'm using this marker to clearly identify all the bad fiberglassing spots. I'm just doing this so I don't miss or forget anything. With all those spots in mind, I whipped up some more beautiful thickened epoxy. However, this time I decided to use a large flat putty blade thing to help spread the thickened epoxy. This helped me get a nice smooth pattern while also evenly distributing the epoxy. This large guy was somewhat tough, but I made it work.
All of the imperfections on the port and starboard side have been filled with some nice thickened epoxy. Now I can go back and take my palm sander, got some 80 grit, and I'm gonna sand these guys flush, and then I will slap on some more fiberglass.
Despite me sanding these patches down and making it look kind of easy, things started to quickly go downhill.
All right, so I am running into a slight issue.
I guess my sawdust wasn't fine enough when I made the thickened epoxy, so now I'm dealing with these large, rough surfaces. I tried using the flush cut saw and even went down to 60 grit sandpaper, but they both didn't help. I honestly don't know how to fix this. I'm just joking, I'm not a dumbass. I just grabbed my angle grinder and used the side of the blade to help sand down the thickened epoxy. This ended up working perfectly and was incredibly fast. I mean, I was just cooking through these rough patches. I also used the angle grinder to help clean up some of the rough fiberglass work. Once everything was roughly smoothed out, I was able to go back and use the palm sander again.
Ooh, that's pretty smooth. Okay, so a lot of you are gonna talk some comments, but going back to using Bondo to fill these holes, you'll better shut the up when you say, oh Jack, you shouldn't use Bondo, that's for automobiles and whatnot. I don't care. My boat, my rules, I do what I want. Let's just open this up. Oh, look at that green goodness. I love it.
Similar to how I applied the thickened epoxy, I did the same with the Bondo. I just used a wider putty blade. Now, if you've never worked with Bondo before, it usually dries within 30 minutes depending on how much hardener or activator you used. So once I'm done with this application, I can go back and just sand everything smooth.
All right, so I got the starboard side all bondoed up and it's looking pretty good. So now all I have left to do is the transom.
The transom was light. It really didn't need that much Bondo.
Boom, it's been about half an hour and everything is looking pretty good. The starboard and transom are nice and done. All the patches are completely dried now, so I can finally go back with my palm sander, sand everything smooth in prep for the fiberglass and more epoxy.
Now this was much more enjoyable to sand compared to the thickened epoxy. I just chucked my mask on, played my 80s rock, and went to town.
Oh, I just forgot something I gotta do. I forgot that, so see how there's some fiberglass tape right here? I gotta do the same on this side, but I need to sand off more paint so I have a larger contact surface for fiberglass. I get to get up here and do some more goddamn sanding.
Now, if you remember when I sanded the port deck towards the beginning of the video, yeah, this is the same process, but now I'm doing it for the starboard side.
All right, there we go. We got a nice little edge going all the way down to the transom.
Finally, with all the sanding done, I can move on to some fiberglassing.
I wonder what would happen if you swallow this. oh, fuck. God, that's gross. I don't like it. Okay, that looks good enough. Let's grab a paintbrush. I'm gonna wet the boat with the epoxy. So then when I come back with the fiberglass tape, it'll stick nicely and there won't be any issues. Grab you. This is what I was worried about, the wind. But I think I'm good. Perfect.
With that port edge complete, I'm now repeating the same steps, but for the starboard side.
So now I'll go back and just soak the hell out of this.
If you're fiberglassing, please add more epoxy than you need. It'll help prevent bubbles and create a very strong bond.
Look at that beautiful epoxy.
Moving up to the bow, this step is similar to the transom. I made sure to heavily wet the bow beforehand, then added the fiberglass. Using my paintbrush, I just dabbed some more epoxy into any dry spots.
All right, there we go. I wasn't even gonna film this. I was just, laying out the fiberglass tape to figure out how much I need. Look how straight this is. Look how straight it is. There are no twists or bends in this tape whatsoever. What is this shit? I really don't know what to say. I'm really disappointed at this tape. So, here's the plan.
I need to fiberglass the edges of the boat from the bow to the stern. Since I have no one to help me, I'm essentially using painter's tape to help me hold the fiberglass in place. Starting at the bow, I attached the fiberglass to the hole with some of the epoxy, and then I added some painter's tape. As I made my way towards the stern, I just grabbed another piece of tape to help me hold the fiberglass. This ended up working pretty well and looked pretty clean too. Whoa, transition. I literally just did the same thing for the edge of the deck. With these gorgeous fiberglass strips, I started the process of adding some epoxy. This was a little tedious because I had to constantly lift the fiberglass without making it fall off the boat, add some epoxy to the deck, then place the fiberglass back down and add more epoxy.
So I've decided to change something up. Instead of finishing like fiberglassing and epoxying for this top rail, I'm gonna work on the bottom rail.
Pardon the no shirt, it was hot as hell outside and I was sweating ass off.
I just wanna let it go for the night. That would be the best therapy for me. All the crazy shit I did tonight, those would be the best memories. I just wanna let it go for
Now I'm just going to be doing some more fiberglassing, essentially reinforcing all the weak areas of the boat.
hey, hey. Yeah, yeah.
All right, now it's time for the top row. All right, there we go.
With the transom almost complete, I added some final touches such as this bottom strip of fiberglass. I also quickly added some fiberglass to the drainage holes.
And I just realized we haven't been checking off items on the checklist. We finished the cockpit drainage hole, we finished off the transom, we removed all the high spots, the fiberglass, and we added more. Let's move on to the old hatch.
I didn't fully waterproof this hatch when I first made it, so I have to remove all this old wood and fix it up.
Alright, so I got all the bare wood nice and sanded. So now I got these tiny little like square pieces of wood. These will be the new tracks.
With the new tracks in, I gave everything a nice heavy coat of epoxy. I also decided to completely sand the hatch itself. She was a little sun faded here and there, but my palm sander quickly changed that.
It's getting late, but I don't mind. It's getting late, but I don't mind. It's getting late, but I don't mind. It's getting
With a clean slate, I also gave her a heavy coat of epoxy, making sure to get into every nook and cranny. Alright, now that the epoxy is nice and dried, I can finally go back with the sander and sand the whole of the boat one last time. With my little Dremel, I cleaned out the drainage holes and got them looking pretty good.
Alright, so I'm gonna stop there with the port side. It's getting a little too late to use power tools.
I didn't want to be rude to my neighbors, so I just wiped down the boat, revealing its beauty. This is during the next day, I promise. Anyways though, I got back to sanding. Literally after hours of sanding, I used up the rest of my epoxy and coated the entire boat with a somewhat heavy coat. My goal was to fill every single gap that existed in the fiberglass. I also thought that this made the boat look pretty damn cool. Here are some little cinematic clips of the epoxy drying.
Now that the epoxy on the exterior of the boat is finally nice and smooth, we can now start everyone's favorite step, sanding. I'm just joking, I hate sanding. I hate it with a passion. Firstly, I want to start on the deck or any area that is painted white. As you can see, the edges are still pretty rough and there are still a lot of bad spots in the paint and it just looks really ugly in general, so I'm going to sand this first.
Ha! I lied. I'm sanding the hole one more time. I'm also adding some painter's tape to my wrists because previously the fiberglass shards have been at my skin and it low-key really hurts.
All right, let's get started, baby.
The deck was fairly simple to do. I was able to put my body weight over the palm sander and this made the job way quicker. For some areas, I really had to dig into the paint to remove it.
Alright, so the deck has been nicely sanded and I think it's looking pretty good. So now we can finally move on and sand the hull of the sailboat.
Although I was only lightly sanding the epoxy that I just added, the hull was a little more difficult because I wasn't able to add a ton of pressure onto the palm sander.
Alright, so finally finished up sanding. Now I got a leaf blower in the background, so I'm gonna use that to get all the dust off, and then I'll go over with the wet rag just to completely clean the boat.
Wiping down the boat was also pretty satisfying. In my opinion, this made everything look way, way better.
Oh, transition. You know what we haven't done in a while? We haven't checked off anything on the to-do list for a little bit, or at least it seems like a while. So let's see what we have left to do. We skipped that. We sanded off the exterior paint and we prepped it for its final coat. We did remove the old hatch tracks and we sanded the existing wood frame. Ooh, mark out and plan for the keel. Oh my god, what's that? What is that? I don't know. Oh my god. Whoa, what is that? It looks weird. This might be for the keel. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe. I don't know. But you know, judging off our list, looks like we finished everything. So, yeah, I don't really know what to do next. We'll see what happens. Thanks for watching.
The next boat video will be posted in exactly a week, and I can promise this. Thanks again.